Oh, hello there. Yes, Sunday. Easter holds indeed. Time of resurrection. Bit like my videos. Yes. Yes. Anyway, today I just thought I'd do a quick unpacking of the new Culture Forum. Libertarian special friends of mine, New Culture Forum's six-part series on the West. Which is very much a product of its time, shall we say. It's quite intriguing in its own way. Anyway, I've sort of cherry-picked a few segments from it. There are certain parts which I think are quite damning, shall we say, in a kind of only libertarians can come up with this stuff type of way. Anyway, links down below. Do watch it yourself. It's 30 minutes. It's a bit of a hoot. There's some very stirring music in it, which I'm sure you'll enjoy a great deal. Anyway, so let's get on in.
Why do people attack the West, and why within the West does there seem to be a sort of imp of the perverse that wants to destroy everything that gave us what we have?
There are such things as British values, there are such things as Western values. We've got to be confident in what they are, and that is the only way that we will continue to thrive as a society and as a civilization.
We in the West, we live right now, in the most prosperous, most secure, most free countries the world has ever seen, and that didn't happen by accident.
The West is under attack. We live in the freest, healthiest and wealthiest societies in human history. Yet as authoritarian and oppressive regimes threaten us from without, a new movement within tells us to feel nothing but shame for who we are.
Yes, so bit of stirring Elgar for you, and quite a few talking heads, some of whom we'll look at in a short while. The basic problem with New Culture Forum's The West is that none of the terms that are used are defined in any real way. So we end up with this notion of the West, which they place as beginning at the fall of the Roman Empire, I don't know, and seems for some reason, through a lot of the video, to involve the importance of barbarian tribes. They mean German, I think, for reasons that aren't realistically unpacked at all. And yeah, we end up with these very platitudinous statements, like, for example, the state of Israel is state. They mention Israel twice, but they basically mean the state of Israel. And you know, whenever you hear the phrase Judeo-Christian culture, that's really a concept that's very post-war. Nobody really thought in Gibbon's time, because they do basically touch on him, that the land of Israel had really anything to do with it whatsoever. They do bang on about Christianity, and again, it's in a very sort of nebulous way. And yeah, the last talking head there with notion of British values. No, me neither. They are taught in schools, but you end up with that kind of warm beer on the cricket lawn sort of notion of what it is to be British. Anyway, at the heart of this, I think, is a real truism, and the truism that they get to is that when the Berlin Wall came down in 1989, we ended up with a rampant worldwide version or versions of capitalism. And since then, people have realised that maybe it isn't the world's most brilliant system, no matter how much you dress it up in form of a culture war, that actually there might be a few problems with it. You can think about declining wages and declining life expectancy here in the UK and in America, for example. And these things are kind of best explained here.
In the 1980s, President Reagan and Mrs. Thatcher used the West as a rallying cry to help our free societies find the moral courage to stand firm against Soviet communism. But something has changed.
20 years ago we thought the Cold War was over and that the liberal West was secure, and to quote Francis Fukuyama's ill-fated remark about the end of history, capital E, the end. Sadly, that's no longer the case, and we now have to be careful to defend what we have in the West.
So the silver lining of the Cold War was that we knew what we didn't want. It was very clear that we didn't want to be like the Soviet Union. We didn't want to be like Romania. We certainly didn't want to be like Albania or the Cultural Revolution in China. We didn't want any of those things. So we knew what we didn't want, and it strengthened the idea of the West because we could see the opposite. We could see how our values were destroyed and how we really wouldn't want that. And that was, in a way, the value of it. And the danger now that we do not have a Cold War, although we arguably have some substitutes for it, the danger now is that we cease to understand or value what it is good about the West.
Yes, and what we've come to realise is that we don't necessarily want the particular version of capitalism that we've been served in the last 40 years. It has a lot of problems with it, which the New Culture Forum blithely are going to dismiss. And yeah, I mean, just to sort of finish off the last segment here, you can see this with some of their other talking heads. This is effectively making an argument against anything left-wing in its vaguest of sort of wokest stroke culture wars way. And let's look at this next little bit and then we'll unpack some of the talking heads here.
Well, the great controversy that kicked off America's culture war, in a sense, was the battle over Stanford's required course in Western civilization. This was actually the most popular course at Stanford, and it was attacked in 1987, 1988 by the forces of multiculturalism, what we would now call the woke. And at first, they didn't make much headway because this was, in fact, the most popular course. Students loved it, students defended it. But as the battle played out, the forces of multiculturalism started hurling accusations of racism. And so at that point, the balance shifted and the course in Western civilization was eliminated, at least as a requirement, and a multicultural course was put in its place. So as people have ceased to study the West, we have lost the understanding of the importance of, say, free speech. Free speech is really something without which Western liberal democracy cannot exist. And free speech is under attack at the very same moment that we have ceased to study and appreciate the West. Is this a coincidence? No, not at all.
Ah, yes, Mr. Kurtz making the argument for free speech there, which would potentially be fine. I'm not really quite sure we can go back to Stanford. Odd that the course that's a statutory requirement is incredibly popular. Leave that one hanging. The forces of multiculturalism. I think that's a euphemism from him. You won't know that name, but he is reasonably well known in the States, primarily because he's drafted legislation to make the teaching of CRT, critical race theory, outlawed in various states. We can argue the merits of critical race theory and whether or not it's actually being taught in schools. It's not. But generally what that tends to mean is you're not allowed to talk about history involving races, which in America means not discussing the history of slavery, which is a kind of a biggie if you think about it in terms of looking at American history. Same in this country. You think about all of those arguments there are about whether or not there's institutional racism in the UK, which come and go. The government flatly refuses to accept there might be institutional racism in the UK, even though report after report after report after report, for example, into the Metropolitan Police, says that there is. We have the other talking head. Is a guy called Lawrence Mead, who is a man who is probably best known for... how can I put this gently? Is best known for not having a great deal of appreciation for black culture. That's probably the most gentle way that I can put that. Some of the other talking heads, I mean, we've got a token white woman in the sense of Emma, who, I don't know, is she a GB News host? Is she a political commentator? Nobody ever seems to know whether or not she's paid to have those opinions. Here, almost laughably at one stage, she says about it's dreadful to associate the West with exploitation because at the height of the Industrial Revolution, the people down the mines digging that there coal were white. Which is an enormously lovely view of history that, you know, it's not built on exploitation because it's something to do with white working class people. And you know, as I say, please do watch this, because the problem I have with this is, at heart, it ignores any kind of real social history about what ordinary people were doing. I mean, we get bland statements about the Renaissance, which, according to this video, began in 1420, which I think is a little bit early, bearing in mind that Western Europe was still totally feudal at that point because it predates the Black Death. The Black Death was the end of feudalism, but you can't have that 20 years beforehand and then talk about individual freedoms. Well, what on earth would that mean to a feudal peasant in Bavaria? The answer is nothing. And they wouldn't necessarily have been particularly inspired by the brilliant invention of perspective. So, anyway, yeah, as I say, do have a look. It definitely is the product of a particular class and racial mindset. Anyway, definitely going to do the second one. Going to have a look at it now. Might well post later on the day.